Hello. 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 Howdy, everyone. How are you doing? So let's see if this works, shall we? It's going to be an interesting one. I've got running everything through one screen on my poor little laptop, which is balanced on top of a radiator on top of a bed. So, yeah, we have an interesting time ahead of us. Hello, Calvin Gasberg. Hello, Frank Swallow. Hello, Peter Dawson. Hello. Oh, Frank Swallow. The question, hopefully it stays steady. I'm 35 Benvids. Hello, BG40. Hello, Rick Basaba. Hello, Jonathan Burrow. Hello, 96831. Hello, Vice Admiral Nelson. 961. People are very ignorant of the fairy swordfish because they look pretty much. They judge. They are proof that people judge things by their cover, not by their reality. And they really do with the fairy swordfish. They judge it entirely by its cover, not its reality. I'm not sure how good tonight's connection is going to be. That is going to affect how long I go on for, but I hope you enjoy it. And let's see, the bitrate is low, 2.5 kilobytes, and let's see, the bitrate is, yeah, it's on the Wi-Fi, and it's interesting. I might have to do something about that. I might have to modify the bitrate a bit. There's a lot of drop frames. Now, hopefully, that bitrate can keep up with demand. Fingers crossed. It's a suboptimal resolution, but we can hope. We can. Right then. Hello, Jonathan Burrow. Hello, Stafford Thompson. Hello, George Newman. Hello, Paul Beswick. Hello, Daniel Politics. Hello, Wayne Borian. Hello, Ian Winter. Hi, Submarine History. Hi, Constance. Hello, Desert Foxo. Hello, Steve Richards. Hello, everyone, basically. Is the buffering? The buffering is massive. We'll see if that works. We will see if that works. Saying excellent connect, that works. Will it catch up? Will it work? Who knows? Damn. Hello, everyone. Echo at 16 minutes. Well, there shouldn't be too much of an echo. Hopefully. Still frozen. That's annoying. Hello, everyone. So, hopefully it doesn't keep buffering, and hopefully it starts to work shortly. I'm not sure why it's still buffering. And to be fair, the drop frames are still piling up massively because of the Wi-Fi. I think I'm going to end up having to call this a day. I think it's going to be pointless. Yeah, that might be the trick. Go all audio. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear me though. Shall we see? Is it working? I wonder. Hopefully. Perhaps if I do that behind it, and then I lock up this. Hello, everyone. I wonder if that's working. But how about just having a chat stream? Oh, it's so tempting, Cody. It really is. It's very tempting to have a chat stream. Audio's good. Well, that's good. Well, I've now changed the audio to this, so well, I can talk about pictures. Apparently, someone had some questions about this, the Iowa and Alaska picture, and if you can hear the audio fine, then that is good. First time for an audiobook live. Yes. Well, if this works, that'll do me. Trouble is, the only audiobooks I have, which I have access to, I have to admit, are all ones which my little cousins have. So, and when I say my little cousins, I mean my little cousins, as I call them, the the kids that I put on when I'm driving them. So I don't think any of those audiobooks are good. Although I am trying to write one myself, which is called My Little Destroyer, because, well, if you can put a whole series about ponies, why not put a series about destroyers? So, how are we all doing this evening? Everyone having fun? Okay. Dr. C, could the Iowas use the barrel form of the Alaska to make it stronger? Yes, they could have done. Honestly, they didn't because they were trying to go for high speed and they were trying to go for maximum length they could, but most aerodynamic, most high speed shape they could. But honestly, the Alaska hull form could have worked for them. Well, it wouldn't be me if it didn't co-star a squeaky chair, would it? Although this way, I could actually, even I could. I didn't have to change my clothes this evening. I could have just left the dirty ones on for the day. But no, I was going to do it this way. It's just fun. What is the light carrier in the bottom left? I'm not sure actually in that picture. There's not much details about that particular carrier. The details of the picture state that it's the Iowa class battleship Missouri, so it's the USS Missouri, and the Alaska moored at the same pier. It doesn't mention what the little other ship is. However, the escort carrier USS Croatan is apparently Commodore Morris. Plus, there are two Fletcher class destroyers at the pier and a Clemson Wilkes class destroyer moored outboard. So, yeah, it's quite a cool group, a cool thing. Although, yeah, I'm not sure they got the destroyers right, but hey ho, they've got a list. It's the Croatan. I think everyone was the Tiger class light cruiser a terrible idea? No, what was a terrible idea was just building 3 of them and building them like they did. Honestly, the Tiger class light cruiser was a great idea if you built them properly and if they managed to make them properly. And the auto loading 6-inch guns is a great idea if you can make it work properly. It's one of those scenarios where if you don't have it done right, it's going to look like a complete mess. And that was the trouble. It did look a complete mess. So, anyway, what if someone came into the Admiralty, walked up to Beresford? I'm trying to pop out the chat here so I can actually read the chat properly. There you go. Live chat. Yeah, that's better. Let's hope that works and doesn't muck up anything. Senator, what if someone came into the Admiralty, walked up to Beresford and ripped his pauldrons off? Maybe the words, in the name of the Royal Navy, Temporal Excellence Office, you are hereby demoted to able seaman. Well, I think Admiral Fisher would have certainly done a jig, possibly a very big one. Sam Johnson and Dr. Luck, I still think they should have rotated two classes during the Cold War. They should have 6 or 8 large hulls to call on now for refit again. It would be nice. I was asking, I remember Ryan from the battleship New Jersey was saying that the problem was the bow was not buoyant enough, and so ours tended to nosedive in rough seas. So not a problem with structural integrity. No, it was just the design of the bow, the actual shaping, which could be an issue. And Razor, how do you feel about people pointing out mistakes in your work? It depends. To be honest, there are some parts of my work which are, let's put it this way, I'm dyslexic, so I'm used to people critiquing my work, and that's always going to be a case if I feel it's valid criticism. If I feel it's not a valid criticism, then I can be quite annoyed. Like, for example, when someone critiqued one of my journal articles, which I'd written, and the reviewer came back and said, I don't like this because I feel that you should have used a different picture. I prefer a stern view. No, I prefer a port view to a starboard view. And I was sort of going, that just doesn't matter. It has no bearing at all on this. Go away, you little child. But when they come back and they go, right then, well, this could be improved this way, then I like that. If that's what I don't mind that. That makes sense. And also depends. Is it a massive mistake? In which case, if you're going to point it out publicly, can you tell me beforehand so I can check into it and find out why I made the mistake? Which do you think is better design? How do you feel about the placement of the secondaries in the air and the aircraft facilities? They're both pretty darn good designs for what they are. You have to remember, no design is built without limitations. And in many ways, the Alaska class faces less limitations than the Iowas. The Iowas are limited by the Panama Canal. The Alaskas are never going to be limited by the Panama Canal because they're never going to be that big in the first place. So the Alaskas are only limited by their concept and by the fact they are heavy cruisers. And that means that you can do a lot with them that you can't do with the Iowas. So in many respects, I am a big fan of the Alaskas. And I often think that if they had been, they are the example to me that if the cruisers, because of the stuff they do manage to do, even though they're not in the war for long, I think if they had been available in large numbers early in the war, they would have had a very big impact. Marin Paulus, why did so many cruisers only have 4-inch guns? Was that considered the best caliber against destroyers and merchants? Was that supposed to be effective against unprotected cruisers? Yes, and yes to an extent. It was supposed to be effective against unprotected cruisers, but mainly from the perspective of the fact that most of the protected crews at that time didn't carry much armor, and honestly, you could spot 4-inch a lot of spam at the time when they were picking them in pre-World War One. Okay. Hi, Crazy Locker. That's a great. What retrofits could the Type class light cruiser have got without removing more than half of their 3-inch AA battery? Well, I often thought that it would have been quite good if we could have actually. Well, I feel this they've been built slightly better with, let's say, two 6-inch turrets forward and a 3-inch turret forward, and a single 6 and a single 3-inch turret aft. Then they could have been converted with one of the 6-inch turrets forward being converted to Sea Dart, and the 3-inch turret aft being converted to probably Sea Cat. And I wouldn't mind seeing some sort of them getting 40mm and perhaps even some Sea Slug mounts. It could have been a very good, interesting missile farm, basically. And was ripping someone's pauldrons off the ultimate form of disrespect? Not really. It was a good way to start a duel, though. Or at least the fight. So, George Newman, by the way, what happened to the two junior midshipmen with Beresford from the Hawaii incident? Strange enough, their careers do not appear to be as stellar as Beresford's. I've tried to look them up, and it seems to be interestingly quiet over who exactly was involved in their exact details. I think they both have sort of mild case of name changing. But I am looking into them a bit more. I might have missed something because there might be a difference between the American newspapers, which publish a lot more spelling, and the British newspaper spelling. And so far, I've only had enough time with the American newspaper spelling. Hi, Kevin. Who are the top 3 people who are used as scapegoats for failure by higher ups, and you feel sorry for them, and the top 3 people who got off real easy for their screw ups and makes you angry? Well, I'm probably gonna for the latter 3. I'm probably gonna have to include BT and Beresford as 2 of them. But I am annoyed by some of the stuff that Darlan got away with, because I feel it pushed the blame onto the Royal Navy when he was given many options if he probably reacted properly. People who blame things. Well, I think Seymour by BT. I would say I would say the Duke of Edinburgh class video is going to have another one, Admiral Trunoff, and yeah, I think I'm trying to remember his name. The guy who commanded the Pacific Fleet prior to the guy who had them attacked at Pearl Harbor, but the one who basically tried to order them away from Pearl Harbor, he gets some of the rap sometimes, and I find that absolutely absurd considering he kept trying to pull his fleet away from there, and it was Roosevelt who was insisting, but he was asleep there. Hello, Strike. Lol, kind of like rivet counting versus constructive criticism. Negativity isn't usually productive, though. No. Seneca, when reading your work, I sometimes think I notice spelling mistakes. Then I Google it, and it's right. Yeah, that's probably because I usually use the British spelling, or sometimes I use the Old English spelling because it's I'm writing in period, and I get so used to seeing the spelling version in the 1930s and 1920s version. I then write it as the 1920s version. It's still technically correct, but it's not how we spell it these days. Frank's wonder, how much of the extra width of the hour is torpedo protection and bulkheads compared to the Alaska? A lot, and a lot of armor. So no mistakes found. Oh, that's good. I doubt that, but it's very kind of you to say. When Boren, correct, took son's fluffy research assistant for a walk, get back and my hearing aid stopped pairing with the phone. I think it's a fluffy research assistant's plan. You obviously didn't take them far enough for the walk. They want to go further. Rapid Rose, after you finish your Henderson book, you may need to do one on Stanley Goodall. Also, it's been a while since a good book on the Harwich Force. Not that you need more ideas. It could be fun. I do have an idea for a book, as said, which charts the Royal Navy from 1905 to roughly 1955. And I'm tempted, it's going to be, to some extent, I think probably it's going to end up being organised by DNCs and Third Sea Lords. But I'm not quite sure yet. I'm still working on the idea. Real deals. The RDDs. US Supercruiser versus Japanese Supercruiser. Now that's something I want to see. We all want to see that one. Would have been an interesting battle, definitely. It's something to do on Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts if you want to. You can do it. You can build the two sets up if you build both designs yourself, and you can have a pretty interesting fight. I may or may not have done that, and I may or may not be thinking about doing that as a video for you. Friday UAD video at some point. Because I seem to have developed the habit of providing a UAD themed video on a Friday. I can't do it next Friday though, because next Friday is going to be one on HMS Tiger. So I'm going to build a Tiger. Probably going to be armed with 14-inch guns rather than 13-inch guns, because she's armed with 13.5 in real life, and the 14-inch guns on UAD have close operating specs to the 13.5-inch than the 13-inch do. Anglo Navigation Line, aka KGV. Hope you're doing well. Calvin Gosbo. I don't know. Changing radar for fire control automatic 3-inch to CCAT does not seem to be a good idea. Twin or COD 40mm, sure, but not 3-inch. What that Seymour related closely to the Admiral Seymour who bombarded Alexandria in the 1800s. I think they were related at some point. Hi, Grace Halsey. Thompson, do you see a resurgence of the DDH as a budget FOG? Trying to class my St. Lawrence class concept. Could well be. The escort destroyer is a possibility to come back. That's from Brennan. Richardson, yes, that's it. I think it was Richardson, was it? It's the one before, basically. It goes Nimitz, then the one before who gets his ship set into trouble in Pearl Harbor because of the way he's positioned them. And then there's the Admiral who was before him, who was basically going, I want to take my fleet back to San Francisco. I want to take my fleet back to San Francisco. I want to take my fleet back to San Francisco. I was actually thinking, how problematic was maintaining sails and rigging on ships line converted to steam? Can imagine all aft masts being covered in soot. Was this a large problem, cruise? It was, but it was less of a problem than you think about it, because often those ships, the engines only came on when they needed them. Other times they were basically normal sail ships, just slightly heavy and sluggish because they had this big weight in them. Is it accurate to say nobody knew what the fast battleship was when HMS Hood was built? So calling Hood the first fast battleship would be logically given no one in 1920 fully understood what Hood was. No. She's a battle cruiser. There is a very different thing between a fast battleship and a battle cruiser. Basically, a fast battleship has the speed of at least an early battle cruiser, 28 plus knots, but has the armor and the subdivision and the internal arrangements of a battleship. And that's a difference. Hood has the arrangements of a battle cruiser. She is a battle cruiser. The people who try to read back into her being the first fast battleship are just desperate to try and christen her as the first fast battleship so they can have a starting point. When actually the fast battleship really, to an extent, comes about later in the 1930s when people are starting to be anti-battle cruiser, yet you still need a fast capital ship, and so fast battleship is the name. Right, can you see the two DDDs at the bottom? Gives you a great comparison between Fletcher and the four stackers. Yep. Seneca, the things I think are spelled wrong are mostly names of coastal stuff I never heard of. Oh. Steve Richards, I know this is a question. The hood had crushed tubes for torpedo production. How do they work? Were they filled with water or air? I think they were filled with water. I know at least at one time they were filled with water. They might have started out being filled with air, but I think they were filled with water by another point. It was definitely one of the earlier concepts looking at the idea of using water integrated into the torpedo production, because water was considered quite a good method of dissipating energy, and torpedoes were all about the energy. James O. Richardson was relieved by Roosevelt because he protested moving Pacific from San Diego to Naval. He was afraid of attack. Yeah, that's the right one. Thanks, Honor. Did the carriers give flight decks decks camo paint? Would that be a effect aircrew? Not really. They did have to an extent some painting on the decks, and there would be some painting, but that was always careful not to obscure the markings needed for landing and operation of aircraft, so it was limited. Let's take around. If Tiger somehow kept around and is one sent to face to Bismarck, and if Patriots Tiger somehow gets around, when it's the one sent to face Bismarck by Bismarck, what effect is that? Well, the Royal Navy still goes ape crazy and charges out of everything to attack Bismarck, and probably Hood is involved in the charge. Georgine, William S. Parr was named acting C&C Pacific after Kiln was relieved, while the Navy was looking at Nimitz for the wartime C&C Pacific. Seneca Nero, for the first naval treaty, the powers agreed to orientate the limit to Hood, so everyone can have at least one 45,000-ton class of battleships in the usual proportions. Okay. So, Seneca Nero. I'm presuming there's a second part of question to that question, and I can't see it, Seneca. If they did, that would be a lot of big ships. Quite interesting, though, and you probably wouldn't get down from them. And if the RNs allowed a class of 45,000-ton class of battleships, then probably the version they end up building 3 or so super Nell rods. Speaking of books, I love to write one, but I'm cursed by American geography, and travel costs money. Are there any national archives with good online access? All of them are working on them to an extent. The US ones are some of the best for online access, but the UK ones are fairly decent. They're all working on to an extent. But also, there's always the buddy scheme. If you can find which archives are local to you, and you then sort of post it on Twitter, etc. I'm close to these archives. If you want to do research, if you want some research in them, I'm quite happy to do some research in them, as long as you do some research from me. It can do some research for me in your local archives, and there's a fair number. That's part of how mine and Jamie's friendship started up for armored carriers, because I was chatting away with this nice person who knew a lot about carriers, was very interested. It's going, I can't get to these archives, and I was going, well, I live right next to them, so tell me what you'd like to get, and I'll go pick it up. In winter, how would the Alaska class have been against the Deutschland class? The Deutschland class would have been sunk in a few minutes. So, Thompson, what would the reaction of an RN battlecruiser on seeing an Alaska class for the first time? A worthy foe, but probably even better ally. You know, the thing is, they'd have probably matched in quite well, because the Alaskas would have had slightly heavier armor, in fact, than some of the RN's battle cruisers. But the RN battle cruisers had bigger guns, so it would have been an interesting time. If there'd been time to build the Iowas better, would they resemble? They more resemble Alaska's. If there'd been time, money, and energy to, they might have done. But it's a maybe. If there's other design considerations and other infrastructure limitations which affect their design. Senator, so it's the story of the admiral. I've discussed the story on this channel. I've actually gone into it. Who, after retiring, left his friend with his family with his mansion, and after the friend's death, the family kept living in a mansion. He left the mansion to his friend's family. He didn't have his own family, and I think their descendants still live in the mansion, as I understand it. The friend's daughter inherited it. He left it to her. He was very protective of them. Senator, what names were involved? I cannot remember for life. I know I've done a video on it, but I cannot remember the names to life me for the moment. Then it was, aren't crushed tubes filled with air and submerged in the water in the bulges, so they absorb energy by crushing a seal? Yes and no. Sometimes they're filled with air, sometimes they are filled with water. And the reason they're sometimes filled with water is sometimes the bulges are left filled with. Sometimes they reverse that. Okay, so there was one idea at the time, I think, and this is me going from memory because all my books with this sort of detail are at home. But going from memory, at one point they experimented with they did use air in the tubes and water in the bulges. But another time they tried the idea of air in the bulges and water in the tubes to see what it would be like, and to see how it would affect trim, etc. And also because it was thought to be theoretically viable. I'm not so sure myself, but you know, though. Paul Bestwick, first class battleship would have been HMS Agincourt, the 6th Queen Elizabeth class battleship, as she'd been built with small tube boilers. Yep. If she could really have been 28 knot, which I think she would have been, because I think that's where the small tube boilers for Renown and Repulse suddenly appear from. I think she would have been a fast battleship. Water isn't as compressible as air, certainly, but it does move to an extent. It does move round and flow round. You have to remember there's a lot of experimentation being done. When you can't build new ships, you suddenly have to put a lot of effort and emphasis into looking at how to get the most out of the ships you have. This affects things quite dramatically. Jonathan, if you could own any of the big ships at any time, what would you choose? I have a soft spot for HMS Tiger. She was a really beautiful ship, but I'd probably go for Renown. Mainly because, well, there's 3 reasons if it's a big ship. She's not so big I couldn't park her where I liked, which would be fun. Secondly, there's no British capital ships currently surviving, so I would like to have one around. There are a fair number of American ones. I know none of the really cool ones in my mind, but there are actually some American capital ships that are surviving. So battleships survive. So nice to get a British one back. And if I said Warspite, which is the third reason, if I said Warspite, I would have to fight a duel to the death, probably with Drakenfell, for who would live on her and who would own her. So, or alternatively, I would just have to deal with the fact that he'd be living on it permanently, going, "It's mine now." So, yeah, I'll take HMS Renown. It'll be hard enough to keep him away from her, but you know, he might share her with me, whereas Warspite he'd want all to himself. Priscilla, Ian Winter. Could be seen to return a gun-armed cruiser, 20-inch, 6-inch plus missiles and CLS. We could. There was a Builder Pumps as Crazy Lockers put it, where we discussed the gun-arm systems. Do you have Frank's Doug C, do you have a favorite camera scheme? I do actually. There's the Arctic camo they're using in about 1944 for destroyers, which I think looks pretty darn cool. Royal Navy painted some destroyers with it, and it looks pretty good. I tended to paint when I painted my Space Marines. That's the camo I picked for them. I knew it wasn't canon in terms of the colouring, but I really didn't care that much. I wanted my Space Marines to be special. So I nicked the colour scheme from the Arctic camo scheme used for destroyers and painted my Space Marines up that way. I still have some of them sitting as well at home. So most of them are up in the roof, but I do have a couple of sitting around. Why did the Tiger class light cruisers have midships turrets? Weren't the midships turrets useless, completely useless? They had a midships turrets? My brain is. I'm trying to remember which Tiger class you're talking about. When they were originally built, they have a midships turret, I think, today. Let's look at the design, the plan. I think you might mean the Tiger class battle cruiser, but no, that doesn't have a midships turret. It just has a very long distance between X and Y turret. A massive distance. I do love that ship, though. She does look good. She's a very good-looking ship, Tiger. Tiger has wonderful lines. Oh, they did have midship turrets. It's an extra 3-inch turret, isn't it? Well, you know, that's air defense turret, so, you know, you might as well have those. It does give you extra firepower, and it's always useful. And especially when you're going for an air defense turret, having a diamond approach to your turrets does make sense, because it means whatever angle you attack from, you probably can be engaged by at least 3 turrets, which is sensible from an air defense perspective. Remember, I discussed about that when I was talking about the coastal battleships of the Norwegian Navy, or rather, the coastal defense ships. I say, Kieran, how many Type class light cruisers do the Royal Navy realistically need? Well, they could have done with building about 6 to 12. Have I read Bloody War by Lawrence? Yes. What was Seneca Nero? What would the effect on World War II? Right then. So if that, I go back to your original question, which is there. For the first naval treaty, Peters agreed to orientate their limit to hoods, so everyone can have one last 45,000-ton class of battleships, each proportions. Well, if it's a class, then the odds are it's a class of 4 ships. The effect on World War II, well, if they're allowed a class, let's say the Royal Navy and the US Navy are allowed 5 ships each. And the reason I say they're allowed 5 ships each is that then makes the maths easy for the Japanese, because I'll allow them 3 ships. They're allowed 3. and America and Britain are each allowed 5. Let's say France and Italy are allowed 1 each. You might well have a Caracolo completed, but it would be massively modified to be 45,000 tons. You'd have the French go have a panic attack and then probably build something. The British would build 4 variants on Nell rod design. Oh, G3 sort of built up to 45,000 ton. I built the 45,000 ton mark. Probably some sort of fast battleship prototype. It would be 28 knot plus capable. And that would be 4 of their ships, and they'd have Hood as the 5th ship. The Americans would build a variation on the super battleship they were already planning on building, the big 16-inch battleship they were sort of planning on building at a time. They'd have modified it. What would this in fact be in World War II? There'd be some very big slugging matches, but let's be honest, if the Royal Navy has 4 45,000-ton ships wandering around, which are being built by the Royal Navy to be as efficient and powerful as possible, then the odds are Bismarck, Tirpitz, etc. need to be a lot larger. In the German perspective. Ian Stradling and the Clarke. Rewatering torpedo defense system. While water is incompressible, it also disperses the shock to a large area, putting less pressure on it. So it's a sort of balance on what it can be. Dr. Clarke, what game have you been playing to get playing out your hypotheticals on? Yeah, Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts actually mostly lately. Mostly UAD. And Productions, it said that Hood has QE's armor layout. Does that mean it's the armor stretched over that hull, thus less dense, or that the whole ship's armor scheme is matched QE's, making Hood as strong as a QE? No, it means that they have a battlecruiser variant of the QE armor layout. So they have their armor at its thickest point is the QE, is the equivalent of QE, but it doesn't cover the same percentage or same amount of the hull, so it's not a fast battleship. I'm not sure how much I would trust another person to photograph documents, given many of mine do not come out that well. Track does a good job. I like to as well. Ben Garin, can you do a video for us at some point, visually comparing, explaining in more depth the internal differences between like-for-like battleships and battlecruiser arrangements? I will do. I'm still working on getting together the materials for that sort of thing. I mean, thinking about that since I did the Dreadnought videos. But the trouble is, it's finding the right sort of plans. I not only need to go to Canada for HMCS Haida this year, I need to go to Newcastle and I need to go to Glasgow. And so I need to go to those places and do the research. So I've got a big research year ahead of me, which is why I'm away this week with Justin Craig, doing the research, doing the teaching, because hopefully that will pay some money towards all that. Because if I can go do the research, I can do some very cool videos, and I can also start pushing forward with this new book and getting that done. Because they basically would like me to have it half written before they'll give me a contract. They said they like the topic, they like the book, they like the idea, but they don't want to invest in it until it's half written. Which means, depending on how much money I manage to make in terms of YouTube and in terms of Justin Craig and the universities I work for and people buying copies of my book, which is out, I will either be able to afford to do it or not. Hopefully I'll be able to afford to do it. Hopefully I can pay off the credit card and then I'll just work my way through the credit card again, paying for the next one probably. Ben Grogan, and the same for the battlecruiser versus supercruiser internals. And better, a few people that falsely claim X was a battleship and Y was a battlecruiser, despite their real designations. I would quite happily do that. Next one, let's see. If we replace late war vessels with pre-war ships on one for one, and just put the ship itself, just the ship itself, but maybe not necessarily with all the others later on, Will those ships actually do better? Probably not. Because remember, those late war upgrades are quite important. Those things like radar, etc., are pretty darn useful as the war goes on. Oh, if you no, if you replace, I wonder if that's it's the late warships, or do you mean if we replace the pre-warships with the super modern ships they're building? Then it'll probably be better, but it'd be sort of. I prefer it if the RN replaced all its carriers with Maltas. That would be pretty darn cool. So no, that was the feel-good story ending I wanted to hear. Yes, he was incredibly protective. That particular admiral of his of the young girl. There are stories about him and potential suitors. She did. I think she, from my understanding, he did make sure she found a nice and good husband who looked after her, but made sure she inherited the stuff personally, not her husband. Um, but he did his best to look after them and make sure they were both fine. And he looked after his friend's family. Nightmare Productions, you also said that you wouldn't put the Iron Battlecruisers up against the rebuilt Italian battleships. Is that because they couldn't take the beating QE could? Yes. Or is it because in a case of don't send and risk damaging or losing your valuable? And the trouble is, the battlecruisers can't really outmaneuver in the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean doesn't have the space for maneuvering that other parts of the world do. In winter, as the US had or were building six 16-inch battleships and its 9 guns, would that have been better? Would they have been better building Montana class first? Potentially. Rafarosa, Dr. Clarke, I'm reading TPD right now. I know it's been 80 plus years, but the size inflation for what qualifies as a cable warship is insane. Welcome to my world. But also welcome to the world when I start talking to people go, well, 10,000 tons was a heavy cruise, and I go, no. The Iron was building a pretty much 10,000-ton light cruiser at the end of World War One. That's what they defined those ships as. So no, that's not a heavy cruiser. And if you continued building armor cruisers, they would have been about 18,000 tons. And if you consider again, battle cruisers, they start off at 20,000 tons, but again, by the time Hood comes out, they're 47,000 tons. So they have more than doubled. Hang on, let's see. Can you say more about the Battle of Grenada? Not off the top of my head. Sorry. I could probably I could try and look it up, but basically the only resource I have on the Battle of Grenada at the moment, Naomi, is Wikipedia, and I prefer to look at a proper book than that. Steam Richards, if they had outgunned the Tiger to 14-inch guns, useful. Could she take on one of the Sharnhorse? Oh yes. If she could take on one of the Sharnhorse without any worry with 14-inch guns. No, 1640. Water actually isn't compressible, and it isn't normal cycles to any useful degree. No, but it moves, and it absorbs energy quite well. It doesn't compress, but it does dissipate and absorb the energy quite well. Raparazak, probably the wrong place for this, but if Ukraine lights off, how does it go any other way other than badly? Very badly. There's a Foxo. What was the role of ramming for early ironclads? Battles like Hampton Roads could have gone very differently if one had a rainbow. Potentially, but honestly, potentially. But the trouble is, rams require an entire design of the hull. They require shaping. Seneca, before World War One, all the RN ships get magically refit with small tube boilers. What influence has this on World War One, or the Harwich Force, or Jutland? Well, let's be honest. If you magically refit the entire battle Grand Fleet with small tube boilers, you're probably raising most of the Grand Fleet speed up to in the order of 24 knots. HMS Dreadnought suddenly becomes a viable warship again. All the battle cruisers are probably up into the 30-knot range. The German fleet at which point is going to be constantly chasing its tail, and goodness knows how fast the destroyers will be going. Because they're much lighter than their World War II counterparts, but they, with given small tube boilers, they would fly along. If you take out control of HMS Warspite, I expect 5 and 15-inch guns would be enough to deter even Drac from seizing it from you. You may think that, but I think Drac would do his level best. He would evolve into Super Drac or Drac NFL and take it. Seth Thompson, Clarke and Dracfell would get to keep Warspite until Dracfell would get to keep Warspite until I make my way across the for a visit, as I do believe Ian Drac has a tattooed on him as I do. Oh, I wouldn't bet that one, Stafford. You never know. Rorosa, could conning towers armored against battleship caliber shells keep their occupants safe in the event of a direct hit from a battleship caliber shell? No. Often the level of vibration that would happen would cause all sorts of fun to the people inside. From a battleship class shell, and the next shell which came anywhere nearby would cause catastrophic damage. Frank Swanner, anyone else hear that strange low humming noise every so often? That is the trains going past. Raposa, Colin Cameron, in 95, a UK, German, and Japanese alliance defeats and dismembers France. How does the US Senate react to their oldest friend's defeat and much of the world being under imperial preference? Probably not bothered that much, because whilst they have a traditional friendship with France, they don't have an alliance with France. And as long as it doesn't actually impinge on them, they don't mind France falling. What they will worry about is what those countries will do next. After all, if you've got the Royal Navy combined with the German Army on one side and the Japanese on the other, you can't afford to station as many forces as you'd like in the Pacific to watch the Japanese. Because if you do, you won't have a force in the Atlantic. Yeah, it's just not a good position for the Americans to be in. They probably end up trying to either join the alliance or actually starting to fund their armed forces. Okay. Nice agreement. I've explained the 3-inch AA gunners and midships. Well, Westwick, not sure if I answered my question earlier. I posted whilst the shenanigans with bit rates were going. Any guests are coming up on bilge pumps? We're hoping to have some guests soon. Hoping to. Paul Westwick, any plans for guests on bilge pumps? Yes. Yes, we have some plans. We hope to get them soon. We keep trying to get certain people, but we haven't so far been successful. Okay, Chris Locker. Tim Richards, in your point of view, what would the Leopard, the last of the splendid cats ever built, what would it look like? Well, that is an interesting question. That is an interesting question. I think myself it would have looked like a Tiger, but with 15-inch guns. I think that's what I see happening. There is probably a good argument against that, but I see it as being HMS Tiger with 15-inch guns in form. The question is whether she would have two turrets to stern or not, i.e., whether she would go renowned class style or whether she would keep it. And I think that to me depends on the shape of Agincourt. If Agincourt goes for the triple turret outline lighter with 18-inch guns, then I'm sure the renowned style outline, then Leopard probably goes for that with 15-inch guns. Frank Sora, let's see. What is the most unnecessary French ship the French ever built? I will not count the burns since it still carried aircraft. Well, I suppose by that same counter, we can't count out all the third rates, which actually just ended up straight going into the Royal Navy's hands. So, the Gloire, that was fairly unnecessary as a ship goes. Sam Thompson, I brought the Destroyers book by Doug C. Good read so far. Need to get deeper or finish it before posting a review to Amazon. Thank you. Thank you, Stafford. And thank you, Sam Thompson. Let's see. Raw Router. Armor would have been not be enough. Yeah, that's the Conning Tower scenario. As Animarchy said in his Bismarck video, Bismarck design was limited by the size of the Kiel Canal. Wouldn't the larger Bismarck class in the scenario be trapped in the Baltic as it's too big for the Kiel? Well, no, it would either have to fight its way out through the Denmark Straits, or they'd have to widen the Kiel Canal. Anyone think Hitler would be worried about ordering a massive infrastructure project to widen the Kiel Canal just so he could put his larger battleship to sea? Georgian, the hard copy I ordered on TBD from Amazon is now reported as being delivered sometime in the future, possibly even week of the 23rd of February, ordered on 11th of December. Amazon possibly acting as agent for USNI. Alex, what about 15,000-ton destroyers? I'm waiting for them to grow bigger. Seneca, besides the Suez, Panama, and Kiel Canal, and the Straits of Malacca, what other important waterways like that are there, and is the Kiel Canal still useful? The Kiel Canal is still useful because, of course, we are putting through massive ships like that. But also, we have a few other canals which we can work through. But mainly it's still those. Most of those were built in a period when they wanted to build these sort of links. So sure, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Which is, how are sea trials staffed? Are ships crewed by trained trials crew, or the crew who would be going on to do it first, do trials? Honestly, it's often a mixture of the two. You'd have some crew supplied by the builders, some crew from the Third Sea Lord's office to review and assess the ship, and some crew who were going to be part of its first crew. So it's a mixture. Hello, Draconid. Hi, Jack Ray. Remember, thoughts on 5 Congo class instead of normal 4? It's always nice to have an extra Congo, but they don't really make much difference. Senator, and what would the small tube boilers do to the RN's pre-dreadnoughts? Oh, good lord. The aren't pre-dreadnoughts on small tube boilers. They probably don't. They probably still end up about 19, 20 knots because their hull's really not designed for that much faster. But ooh, they could cause trouble in places like the Mediterranean, etc. Those extra speed. Frank I'd love to say those trains are just reminding you how useful they are. They always are for reasonable infrastructure. I agree, those trains are useful for very reasonable infrastructure. But currently, I have a tube line running underneath my bedroom and a railway line running outside my running alongside outside my window. This really doesn't put me in a good mood when it comes to trying to get to sleep. Did any of the Trouble class destroyers get their own book besides Haida? No. But it would be quite interesting to do a book about. Well, the trouble is, there is that lovely 1957 book, which is pretty much a chapter on every single tribal class destroyer. So that's why I didn't take that technique to the ship book and ship books. Russ, what book are you researching for now? I've got this idea that I'm putting together of this decisions it did for over a period of 50 years. And I'm not sure what to call it. I have an idea, but I'm not sure what to call it yet. I'm still working on it. Don't try to see the White Sea Canal. That one needs to be made debunked. It does. Hi, Kevin. Let's see. What's the RN equivalent of the RAF Spitfire versus Hurricane? Spitfire is more remembered, but Hurricane was the workforce, at least for the Battle of Britain, for each ship type. Well, battleships. It's probably the Queen Elizabeth class, but in World War One, I would say it's the 13.5-inch dreadnoughts, which are the really big big ships. They're the ones that really matter. The 15-inch battleships, they get a lot of attention, but the 13.5s, the Orions, the original super dreadnoughts, yeah, those are the classes which really do a lot of the work in World War One. In World War Two, it's kind of strange because the Queen Elizabeth class again do quite a lot of the work, but they depend on the support of the Nelson Rodney, of Renown, especially Renown. Hood gets a lot of attention, but Renown doesn't. Cruiser terms, well, I would say the Crown colonies and the Arafusers do a lot of the work, but the towns and the counties get quite a lot of attention. So that's sort of fair. Destroyer terms, oof. Hunt class destroyers are always forgotten compared to the fleet destroyers. In carriers and sub terms, U class submarines versus the T and S classes, and carriers. Oh, well, the light fleet carriers are the ones which dominate history, but it's the escort carriers which do so much of the work. Thank you, Colin Cameron. Tea cakes and deep fried pizza when you make your Glasgow trip. I was thinking more about going for a swim in Iron Brew, but yes, those two would be nice too as well. Senator, were there French third rates that went on their shakedown cruise and the next port of call was British? There were French third rates which actually hadn't even finished being fitting out in their harbour before they got taken by the British, but leave that to one side. Let alone going on a shakedown cruise. Alistair Shaw, thank you. By complete accident, this is how I started the trial of a new battleship in my sci-fi story. That's good. Interesting. Make more steam faster. Though pre-dreadnoughts would probably not have machinery able to use it. That's why I reckon they'd be about a 2-knot advantage. Well, they had been. Are we going to see any more sword fighting on your channel? Yes, there should be some more books coming soon which are about sword fighting, and therefore me and Drac will be hitting each other again. Look up. What tube line, may I ask? Hang on. I'm considering what tube lines run through the station I'm nearby. Would it be that one or that one? There's an option of two, and I'm not sure which one it is that it runs underneath me. I'm trying to think in my head. You say 19 knots of pre-dreadnoughts are small tube boilers. What were they doing as built? Roughly 18 knots. The trouble isn't the small tube boilers versus the large tube boilers. The trouble is actually converting that power into something useful. Thanks for the Germans and French only fight each other starting May 1941. How might their navies go about it? You're looking for a dust up in the North Sea, and you're looking for the French trying to hunt down Deutschland class wandering around the world. I think heard the Chinese want to build a bridge across the Taiwan Strait. Other than Taiwan Strait being a shipping lane and where Congo sank after torpedo brings through, what other issues are there? It's major water with a range of water and with a range of movement, and I'm fairly sure the Taiwanese won't be that keen on them building the bridge. Roruto, did any Aegis sail ships take any precaution to protect against lightning? And as follow-up, are there any notable examples of ships being lost to lightning? There are some examples which suggest ships were lost to lightning, but they were large wooden objects floating in water, so they did tend to be okay. There were some things done to protect them to try and make sure they were protected, but it was a case of more the reality of the wood and the design and the caulking, etc., were sort of naturally insulative. So the RN invent LST, LSD, CV, and then the US are making great numbers. What does USA or anyone make the RN making great numbers instead? Various types of machine guns. Various types of machine guns when they're trying them out. Other people, Americans especially, would invent them. The US would build a dozen or so. The British would go in and order a couple hundred. Sim Richards, any chance of video on Captain Johnny Walker? There might well be one. Sim Richards, was HMS Leopard a chosen name? There's a debate over whether it was. It certainly makes the most sense for the next big cat name. Glad to hear that, Zafford. Colin Cameron, Doc, if the UK had retained all the Scottish imperial colonies and eventually finished the Panama Canal, how would this have influenced our design deployments? If the RN had designed and had managed to control the Panama Canal and been able to deal with that, then well, that probably changes things. If the Panama Canal and our colonies go that way around the world as the other way around, then it becomes not just a case of making them Suez proficient, but Panama proficient, so our ships can go both ways. It also allows us to really wind up the Americans, because we'd have control of the route, not them, between their coasts. Wait. You mean it wouldn't be a good thing to try to induce 800, 1200 psi superheated steam to the high HP cylinder of a four-cycle triple expansion engine? Those LP cycles weren't designed for 85 psi steam. No. Seneca, what was the biggest pirate fleet, and was it in the RN? No, the biggest pirate fleet ever was one run by a Chinese lady, who had quite a large fleet. I'm trying to remember her name, but I'm fairly sure she had the largest pirate fleet any pirate captain in history, and was called a pirate admiral. Basically, what city is Alex in? London. Frank Otto, Dr. C. In the story of the 40mm and pom pom, which nation also almost went for the other instead? The Americans almost went for the pom pom, and the British almost went for the Orlicon. Not the Orlicon. Yeah. Hmm? Yes, the British almost went for the 40mm. Bofors, I mean, the Bofors. Sorry. This is what being in charge of many, many teenagers does to your brain for the day. You start making basic mistakes. Shaman, Zheng Yisao? Possibly. Possibly Zheng Yisao. She was very, very capable. Criterion, why did British designed battlecruisers have the habit of their magazines blowing up? They weren't made of exploding, were they? No, and they don't really have the habit of their magazines blowing up. It's just that a fair number of them were lost that way because they're put in a scenario for which they really weren't designed. As I keep trying to explain, they were designed for maneuver warfare, not line of battle. So a battle cruiser's main survivability trait is the fact that she can maneuver port and starboard at high speed and keep maneuvering. If you're in a battle line, you can't maneuver. Let's see. How much history changes the USN and Iron switch out their 40mm Mom Bomb? Well, the Americans have a firepower boost in terms of number of shells they can put up in the air. So they get a lighter, faster firing sort of system overall. The British get a far more accurate system that they can use to put firepower up further away. So it swings and roundabouts. That probably doesn't affect much, but of the actual outcomes of operations, but probably has an impact on the micro actions of operations, i.e., which aircraft get shot down and how. So the main method of them was supposed to be dodge. Yes, because if you use the example of HMS Rodney during the battle with the Bismarck, she kept going from side to side, chasing the fall of shot. Well, that's the sort of thing a battle cruiser would do in engagement. They'd chase the fall of shot. But you can't do that when you're in a line formation, sort of a battle formation. So, Richard, do you know if the British had a follow-up design and aircraft to take over from Sea Vixen? Yes. The British were looking at something to go on behind a Sea Vixen. It would have been basically a super Sea Vixen, but it was they were looking at it. Eventually, they ended up going for the Phantom because, pardon me, it makes more sense in terms of cost effectiveness. That's what the government feels, rather than building their own. Strike 616. I believe the pom-pom would need more structural modifications on US ships. Well, no, presumably if they've been swapped, they've been built. The US ships would have been built for the pom-poms rather than for the 40mm Orlicons, not Orlicons, Bofors. That's the thing. When you're doing something like answering a question like that, you always have to assume that the same degree of specialization and design applies for the ships which are for the new system coming in as for the previous system.
So here, the solution to the pom-pom versus Bofors debate: fit both on the ships with the same ammo, only
Labeled 40mm, but not interchangeable. That just sounds like a good way to blow up some guns and kill some crew. Knights Agreement. As we discussed in Bruships weeks ago, if British were a superpower, how likely is the UK would have equivalents to the equals of Ticonderoga class? Very likely, because they'd have some form of air defense cruiser. So they'd have something, but what would it look like is probably more Bristol class. Depends on the radar and missile fit. Let's go on. What was the Super Sea Vixen? Even bigger radar dome. I seem to remember from was my lasting impression of the image I saw. Interactions. I've heard limiting factor of a Sea Vixen was the wing itself, which I've heard one described as a barn daughter. No, anything about it. I haven't asked him specifically, but I have a chat with Michael Clarke about that one. Galgasok. An anti-armor Hurricane variant had two wing-mounted 40mm and a handful of Hungarian ME210 CA1s, and I had one for a handful of Hungarian ME210 CA1s had a single both 40mm both and nose mounted bombway, both ground attack. Chasing full of shot is something I'm more used to hearing them speaking of, say, ships under Clifton Sprite control. It's quite a common RN doctrine. It's what they do at the Battle of River Plate. It's what they do in various other battles. It's how the RN maneuver force tends to respond to a running engagement. Chase the fall of shot. Sam Wilson, how would the RN design have evolved if it was written via Parliament that all ships of destroyer or greater must have at least a single 6-inch triple mount? Panic, because for some small ships, depending on the period, that would have been a lot of the weight for destroyers, etc. For cruisers, it would have probably meant a triple 6-inch autoloader being developed. I think some aircraft have been fitted with 105mm guns, if I remember correctly. I think it was a 105mm howitzer was fitted to a spooky aircraft. One of those C-130 gunships. And so, didn't mean I thought it was anything but a great idea. I've just not heard much reference to it outside of the Slightly Free at Samar. Well, that's the thing. It was quite a common idea. This is one of those things. It's been an idea around since about pretty much almost as soon as the battle cruisers came into service. It was an idea put forward for them. As a way to dodge shells. Well, Karen, I'm planning to trip down to London in a couple of weeks. Do you have any recommendations on what to visit after HMS Belfast? Cuddy Sark, Greenwich is amazing. Also, the B-25 had a 75mm cannon in its nose in some cases. Yeah. Okay. Right. Run. An Italian World War II ground attack plane has a 180 or bigger rifle
Plus, Dr. Clarke mentioned AC-130s. I don't want 5. Manhattan Productions, Dr. Clarke. Churchill actually campaigns and wins the 45 election. What does this mean for the armed forces and the Royal Navy? Probably not much, considering both he and Labour Party had signed up to the report which would produce the NHS, etc., and all those sort of things. However, he might introduce it in a different way, in that he might go for the less centralised, more distributed system, rather than the National Health Service as it stands today. It could be interesting, the variations, but it would be similar, but it would be slightly different. Hi Kevin, Dr. C, in your opinion, what are the 3 revisionist history ideas that people have used against the RN any period that irritate you the most, and are there any revisionist ideas you agree with? Oh, I wouldn't pick out any particular idea, because there is some revisionist history is actually good. It is good. In fact, it's normal there should be revisions in history, because it's as you gather more information, it's appropriate to add that information and understand how that changes things. Sometimes it'll change the nuance, sometimes it'll change the context, sometimes it will change the content once you realize what these things are. For example, when Bletchley Park comes out, etc., that changes the content. So you can't really push these things, but I believe you should always be reading history forwards. So what I find most difficult is when people start applying the present to the past and holding people to the standards of the present in the past, whereas I feel they should be held to the present, held to the standards that they themselves were held to at the time, and that they themselves would have held themselves to. Nice hearing, Dr. Clarke. There was a fin-wing supersonic Sea Vixen and a Sea Vixen with tip tanks for longer-range proposals. There were, and they were working on a sort of version of the Sea Vixen which would incorporate both of those to an extent. There was even one which was a fling-wing version of the Sea Vixen, but leave that one side. Swinging. I think the one thing Churchill might have done is he might have changed the carrier procurement cycle, because he was a big fan of the new build big carriers. So he might well have decided that rather than upgrading the wartime ships, to push for the procurement of the new ships and getting rid of the war build ships and the war damage ships, because he'd have thought that would have been better. He would have thought that was better value for money. Right then. So I'm not going to do a massively long one this evening, because I'm not sure if you can tell, but I have been up since 6 a.m. this morning, and I have been up since 6 a.m. yesterday, and I've got to be up again at 6 a.m. tomorrow. So I'm not going to go on for the massively late. I'll probably do this for another. Well, I'll probably try and carry on till about 9 o'clock. So you'll have 2 hours. I do apologise, but that's about what I can do before I conk out in my chair. I'm not sure how we've got onto a 100mm recoilless rifle on a Vespa scooter, but that's a pretty cool idea. I've seen that, I think. I've definitely seen the bazooka scooter. The Shrike 616. Vickers had a 4.5-inch recoilless light gun for the Submarine 508 Spider, apparently. Cool. That sounds nice. Let's see. Any more questions coming through? The Italians have done so many things with their designs. Let's see if I can change the picture quickly without it dying on me. Because we had that picture up for a while. Okay, so Nighticron. Why are the Typhoons and its early designs the wrong airframe? And out of the Hawker Siddeley HS-12-2 or the Hawker Siddeley HS-12-7, which one would be better suited to a carrier? I'm not sure either of them would really suit it. Just from memory, remembering their airframe design around their wing mounts, that both of them had issues there. If I remember correctly, from the point of view of using on a carrier, but that's from memory. I don't have those designs with me. 9640 Clarke and Frank Solid. If memory serves me, World War II Italian planes carried a monster recoilless. Something issue with Blacklash. Yeah, did fun. I think, as Money 640 says, back blast is probably what you were meaning. That's certainly what I thought. There's a Voxer. At what point would you say that military and civilian naval infrastructure diverge? Would a dreadnought share a dock alongside a cruise liner? Yes, they would. They did. They regularly did. The divergence is that the military dry dock can be emphasized and focused around dealing with the emergency needs of the Navy, whereas civilian dry dock is always going to be focused on basically having enough work to keep itself viable, which is what makes sense. Frank, I have looked up the Vespa 150 tap. I know it. But I'm going with this picture for the last few minutes because I like this one. The Raw Router. When did torpedoes become viable anti-submarine warfare weapons? And are there any examples of surface ship torpedoing a submarine in World War II? I think from memory there is an example of a surfaced submarine getting hit with a torpedo. I can't remember the exact details. As for when torpedoes became viable anti-submarine weapons, you're probably looking in the late 1940s when they actually become viable. Before that, there's a healthy dose of luck rather than a definite percentage chance. And so, I said we've got another 20 minutes. Any last questions? Carl Wilson, Dr. Clarke, somehow it's both a shame and luck that the Duke of Edinburgh, 94 style armor cruiser, didn't get their war except maybe Tsushima. That is true. They tried. Sir Johnson, how cool would be that coming to port and docking in line to a battleship? You'd have an extra tight grip on your more than likely. Desert Foxo, why was Dreadnought so influential? Weren't ships heading that way anyway? They were, but it's kind of like it's the first one to break that barrier. It's the first one to be the Dreadnought, so it's massively influential because it becomes immediately the standard by which all ships are going to be compared against. In starting, torpedoes for ASO basically become realistic when homing acoustic fish. That's asking. A submerged sub got sunk by a torp from a RN submarine. It had a cargo of mercury aboard. That's known as ecological hazard. I seem to remember. Yeah, it did. Nice. What damage would a modern heavyweight torpedo do to a World War II era battlecruiser? Break its back. That's what they're designed to do. Go off underneath their keel and cut them in two. And that is what they do. It was a fun time, World War II. There were a lot of interesting things going on. Right then, as we all seem to be quite happily chatting, and I think possibly those chats are possibly something more easily done in Discord, I'm going to say thank you very much to everyone for watching. I hope you had a good time. I hope you had a good evening. I would normally come on and wave, but I think if I did that, it might die, so I probably won't. So I'll just say thank you. Thank you, everyone, and night night. Hope you're enjoying. Thank you. Thank you, Frank Spadaro. Thank you, for the Benwards. Thank you, Mendes 1640. I hope you've enjoyed the recorded video, which I put out earlier. Hope you enjoyed that, and thank you all. Take care, Carl Gaswick. Take care, Declan95. Thank you, Mendes 1640. George Newman. Seneca Nero. Stafford Thompson. Thank you. Thompson, how many torpedoes? How many modern torpedoes would it take to take down a Queen Elizabeth off fjord? Probably one or two. No, hang on, no. One would do serious damage. Two would probably start to sink them. But if they had good battle control and depending on what they hit, they could maybe survive. Three would certainly do it. All right. Desert Foxo, why was the all main gun armed first done on battleships? Wouldn't it be easier and cheaper to do that on an armored cruiser first? If you look at certain types of cruisers, they are pretty much getting to an all main gun armament. If you look at them carefully, I would argue the Duke of Edinburgh's are pretty much an all main gun armament. Hello, take care, Alfie Rowe. Thank you, Dr.95. Thank you, Desert Foxo. Clarke. Thank you, Stafford. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Naval, DG 96831, DG40. Thank you. Next one. £1,000 high explosive charge on the keel would still break it, would it not? Yes, but not as well as the shaped focus charge that they put on modern heavyweight torpedoes. What were the alternative airframes for the carrier AWACS? I've shown some pictures of them before in the previous video. A broken keel is a ship's a keel is a sunk ship generally. No, it certainly is that occasionally, but if you consider things like HMS Belfast survived having their keel broke, and modern ships have a lot stronger than they used to be, so they have some secondaries. I think shaped charges are reserved for light weapon torpedoes. No, the charges in the heavyweight torpedoes, especially the Russian ones, also do have some shaping. From memory, this is from memory. I haven't got my Norman Polmar book behind me, but that does have a section on the torpedoes. So when I'm talking about heavyweight torpedoes likely to be hitting the British and American carriers, I'll automatically think of the Russian ones. The British ones, not really. The American ones, not to an extent, but they're not really heavyweight as like some of the Russian torpedoes. So, hope that makes sense. That's it. Is that some Sunday books video from earlier? Yes. How many fluffy torpedoes to sink a duck? Goodness knows. -640. I'll have to hit you up for that info when you get back. Yeah, Norman Palmer's Soviet Submarines book is where I think I got that from. It's worth a read. It's a very good book. I think I might have a digital copy of it somewhere, in which case I'll send you it. 9640. If you remind me on Discord, I'll try and dig it out tomorrow if I do. Yeah, £1,000 charge was M48 ACAT. Right. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. And as said, hope you have a nice evening. Thank you. Sorry, it wasn't the normal. But the Wi-Fi just wouldn't support it. But yeah, I cannot recommend the Norman Palmer books on the Soviet Navy are really, really good. Some of them are based on absolutely bare intelligence, but they are very, very good and worth reading. I say, the people who think that book you showed is propaganda make no sense. No, they don't, which is why I talked it through. Anyway, take care, everyone, and thank you. Bye.